It is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for another edition of Closing the First Deal. My name is Holly and my co-host, Dr. Gavin Adams. We're here today and we have the pleasure of interviewing none other than Dr. Anthony Seriki, who's going to be sharing some of his first deal experiences and just hopefully you could grab something that you could use on your own experience. So with that, take it away, Gavin.
So welcome, welcome. Thanks again for spending some time with us and the willingness to share your journey. So we're going to start off with the first question. What inspired you to get into your real estate journey? How did it start?
What inspired me was more so just my upbringing, coming from an immigrant household. Financially, my parents didn't have the means to have their own property or have their own space, so we lived in public housing. So just growing up, it was just that understanding that as we, build that capacity to, in our professional spaces, we'll be able to, find the means to, ultimately buy and own our own property because ultimately that is the goal and that is the American dream to have your own.
So while you were growing up, did your parents speak about financial literacy? What did they do to like prepare you to have that mindset that you currently have now?
Yeah,
If they
I don't want to say be frugal, but it was more of like be really intentional about how you're spending your money. But I think a lot of that just comes from just not maybe having much. So it's like whatever you do have, just be really intentional when you do spend something. So I think that was more so our conversations. Of course, like get a stable job, have a savings, don't have credit cards. Like that more of the conversation that we were having growing up.
with them telling you to save and like talking to you about the importance of like thinking, being mindful about your spending habits, what did that influence like what you did to acquire your first property? Like what was your strategy?
I guess so. Part of the strategy in buying the first property, it was literally just I already had savings because, like I said, growing up, that was just the conversation. Just always have a savings. Don't have shoebox money, but have money away for a rainy day, right? And of course, I'm working for the Department of Education. You have a retirement funds. So understanding that and having conversations with my older sister who had bought a property through her retirement money, the money that she saved, she kind of gave me the game plan in terms of how to approach getting my own household.
Oh, nice. So is your sister a realtor? Is that, did I hear that correctly? Or
She's not a realtor, but she had her own house as well. So, like I said, growing up, the biggest thing was like at some point we do want to have our own because the dreams of our parents was that when they settle down and they provided us with our needs to flourish, it was more like now as an adult, now you have your own kids, you got to give them that and tenfold.
yeah.
So one of the biggest things is having your own property because with that can build wealth. No one can ever take that away from you. So that was like the conversation. That was the idea. So my sister was most like, "Hey, Anthony, like now if you save this kind of money, you've got this kind of job, you making this kind of money. Now I think it's really important to now get this house. So you're starting a family. That's really important as well. You're gonna have your own.
So would you say it was more you and your sister talking about what you guys would be doing for the future generations, or did those discussions come from the parents? Can you walk us through that? Because it didn't happen to where your sister and yourself became who you are today without
Mhm.
there being some discussion and planning and preparation behind it. So just going back, speak more about both of you being first generation homeowners and
Mhm.
dive a bit more into spending with intention, being frugal. Being frugal is not a bad thing. Some people
Mhm. Mhm.
give it a negative connotation, but to me, it's positive. To me, it's we're
Mhm.
not going to spend unnecessarily until we're doing it with reason. So I'll let you start with that.
Okay. Can you go back because it went in and out for a second? It starts to
All
fade
right.
out.
So I'm asking you to go over, cover some of the discussions you had with your sister or with your
Okay.
family with regards
Mhm.
to your sister and yourself preparing to be first generation homeowners. Because a lot of time it usually happens with like one of the siblings before the other, but it sounds like you guys were kind of on the journey simultaneously.
Absolutely. So let me actually rewind for a second. So my parents end up buying a property. So they were actually the first to actually have that home ownership. So we went from public housing to private owning. Our parents own a condo in Harlem. So that was like the initial seeing them get that going. It was like, oh wow, like mommy bought this, but she told us like she's always saved. And then out of nowhere, it's like boom, like we went from this household to this household. So now having those conversations with my mother, it was like, okay, like what were the steps? And she's like, Anthony, literally all I ever did was save my paychecks. That's all I ever did. But for you guys went to school in America. You understand like how to navigate the process of home ownership. You understand the process of knowing what the APRs are and knowing interest rates. You would understand that. You can speak more to that. For me, it was more so like I came from another country. I want to own something. That was like the discussion. Now, so for us now, because by the time they bought the property, like we were already graduating from college at this point. So for us, it was not how do we get to this point faster? Like that was the conversation more. So okay, so now we got this property. How do you get this a lot earlier in your life than I did? We're still enjoying like even now, if I'm visiting my parents' household now. But how do you get to this point faster? So it was okay, you have your savings, right? Okay, you have this money to the side, you have this money in your retirement fund. Okay, now let's kind of have those conversations around where do you think you want to have your family at? Where do you want to grow? Now you're looking at neighborhood because, like I said, my parents when they bought the spot, it just maybe a few blocks from where we grew up at. They purchased a condo. So for now, for us, more okay, you want to be intentional. So now you're looking into different neighborhoods. You're looking into different towns. You're looking into school zones, right? That plays a very important factor when you want to buy a property because now that goes into like your property tax. And so you're now sitting back. Now you have to be really strategic now and say, oh, okay. So it's not about just buying a house anywhere. Now you're looking into neighborhoods where your kids may possibly go to school at. There may be less crime. You're looking to see, okay, where's the local shopping centers? Where's the next highway? You're looking at all those things play a factor in buying your property. So now, so in talking to my sisters and talking to my parents, was okay, now where do you see yourself living at? Do you want to stay in the city? Do you want to go live in the suburbs? Like, what is your dream? And I guess for me, as someone who grew up in the city, it was more like growing up and you watching all these TV shows. You know, I'm a 90s kid. I'm a 90s baby, right? So I'm seeing all these sitcoms, they all live in houses. They didn't live in condos. I mean, the only one was probably the Cosby's, but they had a brownstone, right?
Yeah.
So but everyone else had a house. You know, Fresh Prince, Family Matters, Step by Step, all these shows, you know, had house. So for me, I guess in my head, I was like, well, I want to buy a house. Like I want my kids to go in the backyard. I want to have the white picket fence. I want to have the American dream. So for me, it made me be a little more intentional when I started looking for the property. And I guess for most people that live, I guess more so like in Manhattan, Harlem, maybe the Bronx, the next gradual step is like New Jersey for most of us. So it's not like Long Island. It's like, okay, you go to New Jersey.
Again, moving with intentionality and
Mm-hmm.
thinking, you know what, my parents did it while I was in college. I'm going to be mindful
Mm-hmm.
about it during my career. What were some of the steps that you took in order to save for that? When I say that, I mean the actual purchase of the house because you
Okay.
didn't stop living, right? You still
No.
traveled, you still had a social life, right? So how did
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
leverage your job? Did you have any other like supplemental income? What was your approach to actually save towards? Because a lot of people in New York City feel they can't afford the
Mm-hmm.
tri-state area. So how were you able to do so?
The biggest thing in the back of my mind was my parents always saying save. So when it came time to like every paycheck, I'll put a decent amount away. That was always my logic. And one thing that my mother always had taught us from a young age, and even to this day, is cut your coat to your size, which means live within your means, get what you need. Everything else you don't really need if it doesn't fit you properly. Right. So that logic is what I carry with me. So when it came to my job now, every job I had, when they had a retirement fund, I took a bulk of my paycheck and I put into retirement vehicles. So whether it was my 457s, the 401ks, the TDAs, which are retirement vehicles, right? Those things is what I use. So it was like, okay, if I know I'm making X amount of dollars, I'm taking a large percentage of it, 10%, 15%, and dumping into this retirement. So by the time I was able to purchase my house or put myself in a space to purchase the house, it was okay, I have X amount of dollars in here. The bank is saying, what, you need 20%? It's been a while. But it's like, you need 20%? Okay, cool. How much is that? I'm going to my banker, XYZ. Okay, cool. I can easily jump right into that and take that large sum of money out and be able to verify that this is liquid money that I have. Because when you purchase a home, they're doing that background check. They're running through your retirement vehicles. They're looking at your bank statements. They're trying to see if you're a person that's trustworthy to give you that mortgage. So them being able to see a large dollar amount that I had aside, it just made it that much more easier to purchase. I think for me, but I think the biggest thing for anyone in New York City that may want to purchase a house or purchase their own space is really just cutting back on things. Like people like having a social life, great, but also being able and being mindful to save. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like I know if I didn't have the means, I wasn't going anywhere. Like, and even in the process of purchasing a house, it was like, okay, the goal is to purchase the house. And my wife and I purchased the house in 2000. That was 2019. So literally, like a year leading up to it, it was okay. We really need to strictly put ourselves at this point here. Okay, so every check we're putting this extra money away. We're living within our means. We're cutting back on these things because this is the ultimate goal that we want, and we have to sacrifice. So when you put yourself in that space, say, I'm going to sacrifice to obtain this goal of mine, it makes it that much more clearer. So that means if I have to cut down on trips, I'm cutting down on dinners, I'm cutting down on happy hours. That's what I was going to do, and that's exactly what I did. So it made it that much more easier for me to tell my peers, like, yeah, I'm going straight home from work today. I'm just taking it easy, like because that was just something that was in my heart that I wanted to do. My wife and I at the time we were expecting our second born at the time, so it was okay. This is what we want to do now. How do we get here? Let's put this pen to paper. Let's write down the numbers. This is the price range we're looking at for a house. Okay, this is what the research is saying that you should be able to put down. What do you have in savings? What do you have in savings? Okay, you have that. You have that. Okay, let's make it happen.
So you didn't do it on your own. What was the process like, if you don't mind sharing your financial approach of buying your first product, your first purchase? A lot of the people we interviewed did it on their own, right? So what was it like partnering up with someone?
For me, I didn't. The process wasn't that difficult, only because we had a shared mission. So like that was the thought process. It was like, okay, like this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to do it. Like it was just very that simple. And I think that it goes on a case by case. But for like my spouse and I, it was very like, listen, this is what we want. This is our goal. We have a family we're raising. Um, what are the steps that we're going to do to do it? Are you taking out the loan or am I taking out the loan? Okay, cool. Like, who has the better credit score? Like, you're not having these kind of conversations with this person now. Okay, who has the better credit score? Who has the less debt? Okay, who has what's it? Um, what's the phrase?
That's the income ratio.
That's income ratio exactly. Like, who has that? Like, so now you're sitting down having these kind of conversations now where you're going, okay, like okay, so it looks more realistic that I'm the one that should take this loan out because maybe I have more debt or I don't have as much debt, right? It depends on your particular household. But if you're doing it with your partner that you look to, God willing, do the rest of your life with, it makes, to me, like I said, it just felt like an easier process, very seamless process when we were navigating the real estate market.
That I love that you guys had a shared mission and decided to do it together and having the deep conversations about financials. Because I feel like a lot of couples sometimes they shy away from that area and they may do financial things separately, but I feel like sometimes coming together as a team helps strengthen the relationship. So I guess with that, like, what was your experience on closing on the first deal? Like, you have two different personalities looking at the houses and the areas. Like, how did you guys come together on that?
Oh man, that was probably like the most difficult part of anything. It was just like, where do you want to live? No, where do you want to live? Okay, now where do we think we this will make the most sense, right? So we're looking between Staten Island, New Jersey. The first step was like Staten Island, and it was like well, the prices at that point was like pretty high. So the next step my wife recommended was New Jersey. A lot of people from Staten Island live. So I work in Staten Island. So a lot of people was okay. The next step of where they may reside is New Jersey. So you know, and they always say you get the bang for your buck. You get more space. So that made it a little more easier. And then we just kind of just figured out like, we use what is it, what, Zillow? We're looking online and use that platform. We compared it between a few different other websites. Then we got our real estate agent and we just really hit the ground running and started just searching.
Any good advice, quick advice for the fellas when shopping for a house with their spouse? Is it that this might be a major gem? If it comes to you later, cool. Just keep it in mind. We can move on for now if you want.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. We'll circle back.
He's trying to choose his words wisely. That's cool.
I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker. So I'm gonna circle back.
That's cool. So were you guys recommended a realtor, or did you guys just go to Google and find someone?
What did we do? I believe I want to say we went through Google. I think we went through Google at the time. I want to say we used Google, used that platform. But we both were like looking heavily. I just really recall. It's been some time. It's been about like 6 years now. But I just
Yeah.
really recall. I really recall us like hitting the ground, like asking people that we knew, some of her friends who purchased homes in New Jersey, who they use. I recall us reaching. I think we reached out to like our lender, see if they had anybody they recommended for the real estate process. But I really recall us like shopping around and ultimately going with, I believe, someone we found on Google, I want to say.
Okay, that's good. That's a different answer. Okay, I like it. So it obviously turned out to be an amazing experience. So would you have done anything differently with your first close?
I feel like it's always something you could do differently. Let me give some information to the people, right? So I grew up in New York. I grew up in an apartment my whole life. So there's things that my eye wasn't seeing that my spouse saw who grew up in a house, right? So for me, like I wasn't really looking at like, okay, how is the electrical panels working? Um, is the roof good? Like when was the last time the roof was fixed, right? Like what about the boiler? Like those were things that I really wasn't thinking about when purchasing the house. My wife was like, hold up, like these are things that we should look at because I recall, no, this is her, like her family or these are things that we had to fix in our home when a rainy day happened, right? Or there was a flood, right? Like those were things that like she brought to mind to me. And I was like, wow, like this is a great question. So now when we're looking at houses, we're asking the questions, okay, like this electrical panel, when was the last time this was fixed? So I've been looking at the chart in the booth, like, okay, this was 3, 4 years ago. Okay, this house here, when was the last time this roof was fixed? Okay, just last year, right? So like those are some very important questions now when you're looking at a house. Now you're looking at the boiler system, right? You're looking at the roof system because everything else can be cosmetic, but the internal part of things that's going to cost the most because a roof fixing roof can maybe cost you $15,000 to $18,000. A boiler may cost you 10 to 15,000 depending on what system you're using, right? So those questions are really, really important and really helpful in the process. We're like, okay, wow, like so this boiler was just installed. Okay, check. The roof was just done like 2 years ago. Check. Like those are things that really played heavily in us looking at the homes that we're looking at. Like those were kind of questions. So when I say we're very intentional about those things. Whereas initially, I'm like, oh, I just want to buy this house. No, I want to buy this house. Like, hold on, Dave. Like, let's like ask these kind of questions. Let's ask this kind of thing so we can find out so that on the back end, we're not now having to shell out another 10,000 to fix this or another 15 to fix that. So those were something that, with that right there in itself, is something that comes to mind all the time. Like, even when her and I have those conversations, like, oh wow, yeah, I recall us asking this, asking that question.
So it's interesting that you guys were able to check boxes off during your search. But one thing we can't really account for is Mother Nature or things happening, right?
Right.
So you closed in
Mhm.
2019, as you mentioned before, and no
Mhm.
one could have anticipated what was going to happen in 2020, 2021.
Mhm.
So what was your experience like as a new homeowner? You guys just closing and then the world shutting down on you.
Wow. That's a great question. So we had just had our son October, and then the world shut down that spring of 2020, right? So it was definitely in it was definitely as we all were learning, everybody around the world is like, how do we now survive just living indoors? And one thing we just kept on saying was like, wow, like, we're thankful that we have the space, right? We're thankful that we don't have to be on top of each other, right? Like, so just literally just purchasing the house and now being able to walk throughout the house, have different spaces for the children to operate. I'm working remotely. She's going into the hospital. Like, all these different things were happening at one time, and all we can say was like, wow, like, we're just thankful that we still have income coming in. We have a place to lay our head. Because at the time people were being laid off, like, people were dying. So all these different things were happening around the world. And at that very moment, it's just like, wow, like, we're just thankful that we have a space where it's like, oh no, we're not inviting you in. Because, like, because everybody around the world is scared, right? So everyone is now like, oh wow, like this. So now when we're seeing family members, it's like everyone literally, like, like, in the driveway saying hi. You know what I mean? Like, we're waving from out the window, like we're driving all over. Literally, but just having that distance in between, that part was rough, but it was still that idea of like, this is still our home, right? We can come back to, we feel safe here. But it was definitely something that was like, wow, like, we literally just purchased this home, and now we're literally, I don't want to say stuck here, but it's like we have a safe haven in this new space.
5 years later now. Congratulations. 5 years later, right?
Thank you.
2024,
Thank you. Yes.
right? Coming up. So how does it feel today? Now that you're in your home, there's a sense of normalcy. How does it feel to be that homeowner 5 years in?
Really thankful. Because, like I said, it's an entirely different way than I grew up. Being able to drive into my driveway, being able to have my own personal space in my home. My wife has her personal space in her home. So just thankful to be able to have been blessed with the opportunity to be able to own something and ultimately be able to leave something behind for my kids. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things a parent can do for their children, is to set them up a little better than they were set up when they were coming. So those are things that I think about, right? And having this home and having this space, and God willing, as my children get older, and when they move out, they can come back and say, "Hey, this is our home. This is where we grew up at. This is ours." Because I come back to my old neighborhood, and see the old apartment. I'm like, well, somebody else lives there. It's back to public housing. Like, New York City owns that apartment. You know what I'm trying to say? So, but a lot of our greatest memories were in that space, but we don't have access it because we moved out. Everybody's living their own lives now, but a lot of our fondest memories, and not to say that I mean, God willing, we'll still be here. Maybe we'll have other properties as well, but for sure, this property that we own will always be theirs, and there'll be somewhere that they can come back to and say, oh, this is where my tooth fell out at, or this is where I fell at, this is where I learned how to ride my bicycle at. All those kind of memories will be here and somewhere they can always come back to.
That's real nice. As you were speaking, one of the things that I remember when you were saying like visiting family and doing like the drive-by waves, I remember during COVID, it was my cousin's birthday, and we literally all lined up in cars, just driving by, hugging the hong and just saying happy birthday to her because we couldn't have a real party. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
COVID was definitely different. So going back to like the real estate questions, like have you or do you intend on purchasing additional property? And what role will or did your first purchase play regarding future investments?
Yeah, that's definitely something we've discussed. I even had a conversation with Dr. Adams recently about just navigating that process of just looking into maybe owning another space, maybe a commercial space. But I think ownership is, it seems to be like the hot word these days, right? People want to own, people want to multiply and have all these different investments in multiple places. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So that's definitely conversations we've been having recently for sure.
Do you guys think you'll continue on like the single family route, or do you guys want to do like a multifamily? What's your strategy? What are you guys leaning on?
We're still bouncing around ideas, but I believe if we do get into maybe like another housing, it'd probably be a multifamily unit for sure. I think that may be that route if we go that direction.
So our next question, what does generational wealth mean to you, and what role has it played in your life, and what role will it play in your future?
That's a phenomenal question. Um, Generational wealth for me, is something that's long lasting, something that can never end. It starts at a particular point and now it's just giving returns over a long period of time. And like it's something that it plays in my mind every day, in my wife's mind every day about how do we make the next generation a little bit better, right? And I think we've already started that by having a home, right? By showing them that you can own property at a younger age, right? You don't have to wait till you're 40, 50, 55 later on in life to get it, which is still amazing whenever you do it, but you can get it at an earlier point if you are a little bit disciplined, if you put a lot of things in place to get you to that point. And I'm always thankful for the lessons that my parents instilled in me. And it can be a lot of it like culturally in terms of like being able to take care of your kids and create a home for them, like that in itself is also generational because you're teaching people how to love, right? You're teaching people how to be consistent, how to be disciplined. So to me, I feel like all those tools in combination with the things that I've learned in my passing, and now I'm now able to start that wheel of generational wealth where I'm not putting this aside. I'm a little bit more versed in how to navigate American society, right? How to navigate these rules, how to financially, I'm a lot more smarter. I want to say a lot more knowledgeable, I want to say, than my parents were, right? Because they're from a foreign country, they just came here. So for me, as someone who grew up in America and has done reading, say that again? So someone who has done readings and watches news reports, I'm a little bit more intentional about how I'm spending my money and what retirement spaces I'm putting in, what stocks I'm purchasing. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable in that so that as my kids get older, I'm positioning them to be a little more in a better space than I was when I was coming up. So that in itself is generation sure. So as well as monetarily is also intellectually.
That's good. That's good. So what do you currently have any exercises that you do with your children, or do you just tell them, hey, you need to save, or do you actually have like little things that you may do with them?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because our eldest daughter, she's now 7. So now like we have like we've always had like this chart and it's had like different dollar amounts, different bills to show her what a dollar $1 bill looks like, a $5 bill looks like. So we've been teaching her that. And of course, like if you give her chores. So if you do this, this is what you get, right? So now trying to introduce that idea of just the idea of like physical money, but then equally having those conversations of like, well, I'm giving you $5, but that doesn't mean that you're going to spend all five right now, right? So we're going to the store to buy candy. Are you going to spend all $5 now? Or maybe you may just want to spend $1 and save $4 for the next time we come. So I think even when you simplify it in that kind of way for a child, it now allows them to think, okay, maybe I don't need to spend everything in one shot, right? I can save a little bit for later. And I think naturally as they get older, obviously the conversations will be more tailored to like where they're at in their growth process, you know. But as someone who grew up in America and understands, like, you know, finances, I wouldn't say I'm a genius, but I have the basic understanding of how to save, understanding how to utilize credit cards, like all those processes, and just like in that financial realm, I think will allow me to push my kids a little bit further than I was at the time, right? To allow them to get their properties a lot earlier, for them to have monies in their savings, for them to have a rainy day account, for them to have money in their retirement accounts. Like all those things will be able to be passed on to them, and hopefully they'll pass on to the next generation after.
Good. That is so good. Gavin, do you have any other questions?
Sure. So the next question is going to be pretty multi-layered. If you need me to repeat anything, just let me know. All right.
Sure.
So it's all based on providing advice. As you know, or as many should know, you are a mentor, right? You served as a mentor and you've been a mentee. So what would you tell a high school student, or thinking back to your 15-year-old self, in terms of preparing for real estate? Would you have changed anything? And if you could, what would you tell your 15-year-old self? Then what would you tell a recent college graduate, someone around the age of 25? And then the final part of that is you're going to complete a statement for your 40-year-old self, telling your 40-year-old self what you're going to accomplish. So if you need me to repeat, go ahead.
All right. So if I'm talking to my 15-year-old self, so that means I'm just in high school, I'm going to tell young Anthony to keep doing what he's doing. Keep listening to mom and dad. Keep listening, because they're gonna guide you to where you ultimately are at now as an adult. So keep listening to their advice. And they're not gonna stay in the wrong direction. Now talking to, I believe you mentioned a college graduate. Is that what you mentioned? Going out of college?
Yeah.
Um, what advice am I giving them in the real estate market, right? I would say get your feet under you first. If you have the opportunity to go back and live at home, if you have the opportunity to maybe stay with a family member, maybe someone, a well-trusted individual, that will allow you to work and save your money, take advantage of that. Don't take whatever your money that you're making right away and go out and buy something where now it's like you're now stuck in that lane where it makes it very difficult for you long term to get out of. So if you have an opportunity to go home and save, take advantage of that, so that ultimately as you are able to earn money, you're able to save money, you're able to build your wealth, you're now positioning yourself to now have access to more means. So credit cards are going to come at you. Oh, you're a recent college grad. Take advantage of this. I'm going to give you 7,000. I'm going to give you 10,000. I'm going to give you 20,000 line, knowing that you're not really working, right? And now you're spending this money with no means of being able to pay them back, which now will do more harm than good to you, because now you're stuck with these high interest rates, paying back this large loan. So don't do that. Maybe take a small line out and live within that means of that card if you're going to take advantage of a credit card. So that on the back end, when you do want to get a home, because obviously, so when you do buy a home, they do want to see that you have access to credit. They want to see that you've been able to manage your credit line appropriately. So that's something I would recommend to a recent college grad. So if you're able to go back home, go home and save money. It's very beneficial to you in the long run. And that's beneficial to anyone, regardless of age, if they're able to go somewhere for a period of time and save money. But if you're something like college, I think that's number one. I also feel like if you're someone that's fresh out of school and you're given these large credit lines, do not take advantage of that if you don't have the means to pay it back accordingly. And
So your
save.
the third part of that is a letter to your future self. So whether you want that to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So your letter to your 40, 45-year-old self. Dear Dr. Anthony Seriki, you're going to be proud of me and grateful for this version of myself, because by the time I am going to accomplish. You finish the statement.
Let me think about this one. It's a great question. Great question. Okay. I would just simply say, dear Anthony Seriki, you're going to be proud of the decisions you made at 30, 25, 21, because those decisions have allowed us to position ourselves at 50 to live a pretty comfortable life where all our needs are taken care of. So keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on doing what you're doing. It all pans out.
Right.
I love
So just to summarize some of the key points that you made in terms of getting to where you are now, or any advice you could give anyone on this journey, is to be patient, be frugal, listen to your older sister when she says, yo, it's time to lock in, right?
Yes.
come up with a retirement fund, which means not only would you be living within your means, but you're living below your means as well. And leverage that retirement vehicle, because you never know when an opportunity might present itself, in addition to saving.
Absolutely. Those are very important. I don't know if it's just like an old school mentality or maybe an immigrant mentality. I still bounce that around, but when I talk to some of my other counterparts who come from the immigrant backgrounds, it's pretty similar in their thought process, when it's like saving, have a retirement, have a job that is going to take care of you in the long run. Like a lot of similarities in that thought process. So everything you're saying is pretty accurate. And I think that obviously there's multiple ways to skin a cat. And I think this happened to be one way that worked for me. And I hope that it works for someone else.
Cool. I'm sure it would. I'm sure it will, actually. So, any closing thoughts, Holly?
This is amazing. This is good. For anyone who's watching this, I'm going to challenge you guys, if you watch it to the end, to just type the word success in the comments, and also write one thing that you got from this talk. We're hoping that through this series, it will empower you to make whatever decision you need to make to pursue your first investment deal, or to get yourself into position to be able to pursue it. Once again, this is not financial advice. We're just simply sharing our experiences in hopes that it inspires other people. So Dr. Anthony Seriki, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And yeah,
Thank you.
hope to see you again. Bye.
Thank you.